Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Walsh, operating partner at Epic Steak and Water Bar in San Francisco. We've been in operation for about 16 years, January 2008, and I'll be hosting this month's episode of Confidential Bulletin. I'm excited for a conversation that gives us a little more perspective from another big city on the West Coast. We've invited Bob Donegan, who is the president of Ivers Inc. in Seattle.
And now for a word from our sponsor.
Isn't it amazing we live in a world where we can pretty much get anything we need when we need it delivered right to our door? It's bananas. I love the convenience. I lost my charger but got one quick through DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to get almost anything from pet food to snacks to neck braces to alcohol to toothpaste to Joy-Con controllers to headphones to... You get it. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets.
Thank you for joining me, Bob. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
So it's nice to meet you, Brian. I still am waiting for the delivery of the steaks you promised that we could have a meeting over a meal, but we'll do that the next time I'm down to see you. Ivor Hagelin grew up in West Seattle and in 1938 opened one of Seattle's first aquariums. In the opposite corner of the pier on the waterfront, he opened a walk-up fish bar where you could get fish and chips and chowder and coleslaw. And when he died in 85, the company passed to his 5 senior lieutenants, 2 of whom are still my partners. I joined the company in 1997 after helping Pete's Coffee in your neighborhood expand beyond San Francisco and the East Bay down to Santa Cruz, then Pasadena and across the rest of the country, and moved back to Seattle in 1997 to join Ivers. We operate 5 different divisions, 3 full-service restaurants with seafood, 19 quick-service walk-up fish bars where you can get fish and chips and chowder, 4 standalone hamburger places, a lot like In-N-Out, 30 locations in sports stadiums, and then we have a chowder business where we produce all the soups and sauces we use in our restaurants and sell them wholesale to grocery stores, other restaurants, and Costco as well. So company just had its 87th anniversary last month.
I'm super impressed, Bob. So how many units in total was that, did you say?
Slightly more than 60.
And all located in the greater Seattle area?
Correct. The stores perform directly related to how far they are from our offices. So our highest volume offices are steps away, and our most distant stores are the ones that perform the least well, probably because we're not in them every day. If it says Ivers on the store or in the food booth in the stadium, it's got our employees. We don't license nor franchise because we're not good at managing other people, but we're really good at managing our own employees. A lot like you guys.
That resonates, Bob. I'm going to color a little bit the restaurants here in San Francisco and the history of the restaurants that I work at here. Pat Coletto, a legendary designer and restaurateur here of probably close to 50 years. He is the inspiration and principal owner of Water Bar and Epic Steak, otherwise known as the Pat Coletto Restaurant Group. Other restaurants that have been in that portfolio include Boulevard, which is Nancy Oakes, Chef Nancy Oakes, Michelin star level restaurant. Jardiniere with Tracy Desjardins. And in addition to quite a number of other restaurants in the city here that Pat has designed, including McCormick and Coletto's, which is part of the Landry's group. Coletto's, which was at the bottom of Powell Street, which was acquired by the Kimpton Hotel Group quite a number of years ago and subsequently closed. And we have these 2 restaurants on the Embarcadero looking at the Bay Bridge as I view it myself right now on a glorious sunny day here in San Francisco. These restaurants have been here since 2008. I've been with the restaurant group since 10 years. So whatever that would be, 2014 or 13. I have been working in the capacity as a general manager and operating partner. My partner here, operating partner here, is Pete Sitnick, and we've got two chef operators here as well that assist in our operations, Park Ulrich and Colton Hayes. Very chef-driven restaurants. We'd like to believe that we're in the, fine dining segment category. And we've been well received by the community here. And I think we've reached close to iconic status, I'd hope. And we're working towards, if not, we're working towards that. We employ approximately 260 staff and generate close to about 27 million in annual sales combined. It's been a little impacted since COVID. My own journey in this business is I came here as an immigrant in 1994. I'm from Ireland originally and was hired into the Irish pub scene in New York City off Times Square, worked for a number of bar owners there, and then opened a restaurant in the Hamptons in Amagansett in around 2000. Moved to San Diego in 2002 and was hired by my mentor and dear friend, Joe O'Donnell, who's the chair of the California Restaurant Association. He hired me as a manager at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, where I worked for about 12 years or so. And really, that's where I learned the art of restaurateurship and management, and subsequently left them in around 2013 and joined the PK or Pat Coletto Restaurant Group. Well, that's been my journey. It's been a wonderful journey for me, a lot of learnings along the way and meeting great people, and that continues. So, Bob, if we'd like to get into the meat of the topic, if you're ready.
Always ready, Brian.
There's a lot of similarities between both our cities. We're on the West Coast. We live in a liberal demographic here, and we've obviously been impacted greatly by the pandemic. So how has business been thus far coming out of the pandemic, Bob?
So 2 of our 5 divisions are stars. Revenue is up more than double digits. The sports division, which operates in the stadiums, and the soup company, as more people are eating at home and not eating out, they're buying soups in grocery stores and Costco stores. And so we've seen double-digit growth there. And in the sports stadiums, the master concessionaires, who have the right to all the food booths in stadiums, manage their businesses based on cost rather than based on food quality or speed of service. So they tend to pay people at the low end of the wage scale, and the result is they can't hire enough people. At the Seahawks game on Sunday, in our 6 booths at Lumen Field, we'll have more than 350 people. That's because they're making between $30 and $35 an hour compared to the minimum wage that the people in the master concessionaire booths are making. And the result is we have great staffing. So they've come out of Corona just fine. Our seafood bars, our hamburger company, and our full-service restaurants have not come out as smoothly. Revenues are up, but that's because of price increases due to cost increases. But customer counts still have not returned to the 2019 level because people aren't eating out as much up here as they were in 2019. 2 factors contribute to that. I'm active in the Washington Hospitality Association and the Seattle Restaurant Alliance. And as I talk to different restaurant operators, the higher your average ticket is, the lower your customer counts are. So if you're a high-end steakhouse or a banquet place, your customer counts are down 8 or 9%. If you're a low-end hamburger place or Subway, your customer counts are down 2 or 3%. So that's one factor. And the second factor affecting us, with our downtown locations, a lot like San Francisco, only 62% of the 330,000 people who work in downtown Seattle are coming to work on any day. So that's 120,000 fewer lunch occasions or happy hour occasions every day because people are not in town. But overall, we've been able to keep almost all of our 1,200 employees. We've seen no significant increase in turnover. The customers who do visit us are happy, so it feels to us like we're coming out of Corona okay. Are you seeing the same thing, Brian?
It's interesting that you bring up a lot of that data there, and there's obviously a clear similarity here. San Francisco really suffered with post-pandemic loss of workforce in the downtown sector. We're on the fringe of the downtown. So we've seen guest traffic deteriorate fairly significantly, close-ish towards double digits in terms of guest traffic. But as you mentioned, pricing has offset. So revenues are probably down 3 to 4% relative to pre-COVID. But of course, we've taken a lot of price in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly accelerated in the last 2 years. But San Francisco is really impacted by the loss of workers downtown. So we have an incredibly high office vacancy rate here at around, currently as noted just in this end of the second quarter, at about 37% vacancy, which is the worst in the nation. And it has flatlined a little bit there. They're saying that it doesn't look like it's going to get any worse. Hard to believe that it could. But that's had a really significant impact on the day-to-day activity and life of, and vibrancy or lack thereof, of the core of San Francisco. And really that was as a result of our dependency on tech and the movement to work from home. And most of these tech workers had a habit in the past, pre-COVID, had habits of working from home that they took full advantage of, working full-time from home. And as a result, we have this great absence of people in the downtown area. It has had a knock-on effect on all the small mom and pop, small industries, side industries or businesses that were dependent upon foot traffic, and they've closed. So we have a very high closure rate here in the city that has impacted the availability of restaurants throughout the city, which was previously noted as very, very high, maybe overly saturated, you could argue. But we just simply don't have enough people for the volume of restaurants that we have. So we're still suffering a wee bit. Now, I will say, though, that our restaurants, we bounced a little bit in the last, 6 weeks or so. August was a really poor month for us. We could tell that tourist traffic was down. The city is very dependent on international travel in the months of July and August, and it appeared that we didn't have the same volume of traffic like we normally do, and that's reflected in the hotel occupancy rate, which currently sits at just about 63%, which is down from the pre-COVID of 80%. So that's a significant drop, and the city really does need a lot of tourist traffic. So we seem to be bubbling off that bottom a little bit this month. Latter part of September and October was quite good. And we just finished the Fleet Week, which is our great Naval and Blue Angels week here, heading into the holiday weekend, that really proved to be one of the best we've ever had. In fact, the numbers of people coming into the city locally, nationally and internationally was a record. So kind of getting excited at the prospect that we're coming off the bottom. That's the sense that we're getting. But the data still is poor. And as we said, though, when you're at the bottom, there's only one way to go, right? And I'm optimistic that we will come off these numbers over time. There is forward-looking data that is optimistic. For 2025, there are, according to SF Travel, we are looking at about a 30% increase of number of rooms sold, nights sold at hotels, which reflects the convention calendar, which is going to be significantly better in 25 than 24. One other, just Bob, I feel like I'm waffling on here, but there's one other part that's really impacted San Francisco, has been the lack of a return to frequency of visits by our Asian markets. So our Chinese and Japanese and Korean markets have not returned to the volume of traffic that we are used to, especially with the connection that San Francisco has with Asia. And that's one part and one element that we're hoping will improve in the coming years, and fingers crossed. So I think that answers the question broadly. Hotel rates, hotel occupancy rate poor, office vacancy rate high. And then, of course, we could branch into conversations around the perception of safety in the city and petty crime and property crime and retail. But I'd rather, Bob, what is the situation for you in those areas, like around the perception of the city and safety and for tourism?
Well, our two busiest restaurants are on the central waterfront. We've set up an email group that when we see someone who needs help or we see litter, and the reason that happens is if by 4 o'clock on the day of an incident, it's not solved, we unleash those 110 people on the city council member for our neighborhood and on the mayor's office and on the police chief, and they're tired of dealing with whiners. So we don't have a problem with safety or drugs or litter on the waterfront. Now, if you walk 3 blocks off the waterfront, we see the kind of behavior and issues that you see on Market Street in San Francisco. But for our primary restaurants, they have not been a problem. In our neighborhood restaurants in Seattle, the bigger problem is break-ins at night where they break the front door or they come in through a window and they take the safe out thinking that there's going to be a bunch of cash in the safe, when in fact more than 80% of our customers are paying by credit card, so the amount of cash in any store is minimal. But every time we have a break-in, which is about once every other week, that's a $3,000 to $5,000 expense to repair the safe and the door or the window. But generally, things are improving on the safety front in Seattle.
Well, that's good to hear, Bob. We don't have quite as active group in the city here. We have the GGRA representing us here to our city members. We're in an election year, so we've got a little bit of movement of interest in trying to stimulate, more activity from police and community involvement in ensuring that our streets are cleaner and safer. There has been a movement in a good direction, but we are still hamstrung by we're 600 police officers short of where we need to be. And as a result of that, a lot of the crime, as I said, mostly these petty crimes, these property crimes, car break-ins, there is no follow-through. There just isn't the manpower to be able to address them, deal with them.
Brian, how many officers is San Francisco authorized to have?
Well, see, that's a great question, Bob, because we should have over 2,000, and the mandate of the city was, in terms of policing, is impacted by budgetary issues, which were recently proposed that we would pull out from the budget the police cost, the cost of funding the police, and maintain it at a number. So we should be at about 2,200 police officers, where I think we're operating around 1,600. And so political positioning and posturing has meant that some people believe that we don't really need an active police department in the city,
we're authorized for 1,340 officers, and as of yesterday, we're down 475.
Wow.
With the same lack of follow-through, unless it's a shooting, a knifing, a robbery, or a rape, the police don't have enough people to respond to it.
Yes, this exactly the same in San Francisco. We've had a proposal to change the city's mandate. It's on the ballot measure, I believe, coming up here in November, to require that we maintain a certain number of police independent of the budget, which I'd be strongly in favor of. And the issue we have here is the perception that it's unsafe to come to San Francisco, that your car will get robbed, you might get robbed, you'll be bothered or nuisanced by someone homeless, or someone actively involved in drug dealing, which, everyone's heard of the Tenderloin. It's pretty active still there. It's a core issue for us in the city here. And I think the change of administration, if it comes, there's an awareness by all of the supervisors and the mayor's office that it does need to be continually addressed. It's not being addressed sufficiently to my satisfaction. And I think mostly for the people that I talk to in the Bay Area, I just outside of the city. There's a general sense of, well, why would I bother going to San Francisco and be inconvenienced or possibly have my car broken into or myself robbed? And I think that's also filtered out to the domestic and international perception of us, which has caused us to have a decline in our tourism. So we really need to get back to safer streets. We need to clean up the streets. There has been a movement to do that. I know the injunction that's hung over us, that federal injunction that hung over us for a long time, has now been removed. We still have a sensitivity to some of the people who are living on the streets who, for no reason of their own, but maybe some bad luck that they are on the streets. But the vast majority of them appear to be mentally unstable or drug addicted. And so we do have to find a solution there to be able to help those folks. Bob, I'll move on to Bob. Do you want to continue there?
Brian, are you tracking the passenger traffic at SFO, and how has it changed since 2019?
So it's interesting. There was a boost after, in the years of 21 and 22, we experienced an uptick. And then it has become like a bit of a steady decline. So what we've experienced in San Francisco is domestically. So Americans are traveling internationally. So there are less of them flying into SFO domestically for leisure and or business. Mostly as a result of the convention calendar being less than it had been pre-COVID. But domestic travelers are not coming to San Francisco because they're generally choosing to go overseas instead of coming to San Francisco. And international travelers, as we witnessed in July and August, was down considerably, which I can't attribute it to any one thing, other than that I'm associating it with the perception of our city as maybe not being as safe and as attractive as it used to be. So, yeah, numbers are down. I couldn't give you specifically the numbers. I know anecdotally that the numbers are down. So again, I'm hopeful that it will increase in the coming years.
So we saw 49.8 million people fly into or out of SeaTac in 2019. We will do close to 51 million this year. And the area where we've seen the biggest loss of travelers is from China. Yep. We don't get nearly as many international visitors as San Francisco does, but we do get a lot, especially from Canada. And when those people don't come to town, the lack of spending in town is noticeable. It feels like Seattle may be a little bit ahead of San Francisco. We had 44 conventions on the books a year ago this week. Today we have 57 on the books. And hotel occupancy this summer exceeded 2019 levels, driven largely by the cruise business to Alaska, where 1.8 million people got onto or off a cruise ship in downtown Seattle this summer. 70% of them come 2 days early or stay 2 days late and do the Museum of Flight and the Seattle Art Museum and the new waterfront and the aquarium. And that has helped us come out a little bit quicker than it sounds like San Francisco has come out.
Well, those numbers are impressive, Bob, because we certainly could do with some sort of a boost like that. As I said, our hotel occupancy rate is at 63%, which is down almost 20 percentage points from pre-COVID and hasn't recovered yet. In fact, room rates are incredibly cheap. In fact, if you're thinking of going away for a weekend, Bob, I would encourage you to come to San Francisco and you'd get a very nice room for under $200 a night. We really have struggled with returning to the numbers pre-COVID, and I do have to believe that it is related to the perception of our city and the safety of the city. That is the general assessment that's been made by my colleagues and by my own social group and friends who believe that San Francisco really does need to clean up its act. So we, as I said, we are in an election year this year, and London Breed, the current mayor, is in a tight race with Daniel Lurie, who's the Levi Strauss heir, and he has put a lot of money into his campaign. And he currently, according to the Chronicle as of yesterday and its article, was the favourite. He looked like he was going to capture about 56% of the vote to her 44. Now, we do have ranked choice voting here in the city, so we will see how it plays out. But Daniel Lowry currently looks like he might be the elected mayor come November, which frankly could give a new perspective, a new impetus to us for 2025 and beyond to evaluate and look at what we have done wrong in the past and how can we change moving forward. And interestingly enough, Daniel Lowry called my partner here, Pete Sitnick, just a few days ago and spoke specifically about the areas that he was going to work on, all as it relates to the perception of the city, safety of the city, boosting down the downtown corridor, tax breaks to encourage businesses to reopen, and a general positive outlook and framing of how our city should look internationally as well as locally. And I feel like his message was good. And I think if he can deliver on that, of course, he does need the support of the Board of Supervisors. So I would like to believe that his appointment would be positive for San Francisco.
We had a change in mayors, and 5 of the 9 city council members in the last election, and the current city council and mayor are much more centrist than the last one, which was much more of a San Francisco 3 standard deviations to the left council. And the result is that earlier this week, or last week, the city council raised the incentive for police officers who are already certified. If they come to the Seattle Police Force, the bonus is now $50,000 on signing, because they're trying to fill that gap of the 475 officers they're down. And if you're a new officer who just signs up to go to the academy and become certified, the bonus is $7,500 when you enter the academy. We know that until there are more cops on the street, that these issues of public safety and perception of public safety are not going to change in a significant way.
Couldn't agree more, Bob. We're on the same page there. May I move on to a different topic?
Of course. You want to talk World Cup?
World Cup. Well, we have that coming in 26.
Yeah.
We're excited about that. Did you get many games, fixtures, do you know, for Seattle?
I think we have it. Yep, I think we have at least 6, and it depends on who wins. And at least one of those games is the American team. So we're expecting several 100,000 people to come to Seattle in summer of 2026.
Yeah, we're excited about that here too. Levi's, I mean, unfortunately, we only got maybe one playoff game. We have a few of the earlier round games, and that will be a big boost indeed. But we only got, I think, one playoff game, which was kind of disappointing. It seemed like most of the more significant later round games are occurring in, I think, Dallas and on the East Coast, and possibly LA. I think LA got a few of the, next round games, and those are significant. But yes, 26 will be great. And actually, just talking about in the interim, we've got coming up here, we've got the NBA All-Star Game coming to San Francisco in February. We're very excited about that. And we also have a Sweet 16 in March. We're one of the venues for that also at our Chase Center, where our fabulous Warriors play. We're hoping to have a better year this year.
So, Brian, did you see that the Oakland Athletics were sold again yesterday?
I did not see that.
An investor from the Philippines bought them. He's going to move them and call them the Manila Folders.
Bob, top drawer stuff. Comic hour here. A good one. We're very bitter about this, Bob, the departure of all these great franchises. We lost the Raiders to Vegas. We've now lost the A's in the short term to Sacramento, and then ultimately to Vegas, though there are some skepticism about that transition happening on the timeline they're proposing. Sacramento will obviously benefit. 10,000 stadium. People here are already talking about going up, taking the train from Emeryville, Martinez, up to Sacramento, where the venue there is a walkable distance from the train station. But we do have our Warriors, and we have our beloved Niners as well. And the rivalry, of course, with the enemy, the Hawks. What about state measures and local measures, Bob, that are impacting your costs of operation? What's hurting?
So the city council has been more of a problem in the past than it is today. The people on the council tend to be ideologues and not very practical. So they devise schemes that are really difficult to implement. And an example of that is when the city's minimum wage went to $15 an hour on April 1st, 2015, an Office of Labor Standards was set up. And unlike the health department, when it discovers a violation or an issue in a restaurant, will work with the chef or the general manager and train them how to fix it. The Office of Labor Standards seems to be playing a game of gotcha, where they seek to find and embarrass people rather than fix problems. So that's our biggest problem. If I think about things that the city could do to make it easier for restaurant operators, the single biggest thing they could do, in my opinion, is significantly reduce the time to review permits for renovations or opening new restaurants. At our second busiest location, which is built like a native longhouse and all the fish are cooked over alder wood in the middle of the restaurant, we wanted to install a new 22.5-foot tall totem pole. I applied for the permit for a structure, no electricity, no plumbing, on December 5th. It took 10 months to get that project completed. And that's not difficult, no health department, no interior stuff, no heating, ventilating. And it should not be so hard to get new projects done. If they could do that, that would make it much easier for restaurants to install energy-efficient stuff, to renovate it and make it more attractive for customers. But generally, the current city council and current mayor are much easier to work with than the one we've had over the last 8 years.
It's like as if both of our cities operate in the same fashion. We have layers upon layers of bureaucracy to the degree that it's so prohibitive. The process of going through permitting is so depressing. And a number of developers in the city here throw their hands up and just stop because it's a layer upon layer and very, very difficult to move forward. And I'll give you just a little bit of history about our buildings here. We're a new build on the waterfront, I said in 2008, and we were the first new build restaurants on the waterfront in over 100 years. There had been refurbishments and expansions of pre-existing buildings. We were the first new build in over 100 years, and there was a ton of people who were opposed to the building of these buildings. They feared the change. We, however, are now regarded as a community amenity, and there's appreciation and gratitude for what we do here. And we, hopefully, our intent is to make the experience of dining at our restaurants enjoyable to both our locals and to our visitors. And there is a level of frustration that the City Council, our Board of Supervisors and the Mayor's Office, and the bureaucratic layer that has been built over decades makes it very anti-business. And the cost of doing business, the cost of building is prohibitive. So there's kind of a stalling going on here at the moment. There are a couple of projects, one down by the Chase Centre, one near where the Giants are. The Giants are in the middle of one at the moment. It's probably the biggest project that's being done in terms of retail, office, and entertainment. And they seem to have a little bit of an interest happening down there. But overall, there's a kind of a stalling pattern occurring here and waiting for things to move a shift a little bit. As I said, some of our buildings in the city are selling at 20 cents on the dollar. These are commercial buildings. which as a result of lack of tenancy. And those need to filter out. Like we do have some hotels in the city here that the owners have walked away from. Park 55 and the Hilton. The owners of those hotels walked away and handed them back to the banks, and their valuations have now, plummeted, as I said, about 20 cents on the dollar, some of these buildings. So there's some opportunity, and we're hoping that some investors will come in and buy up these properties and reinvigorate them. There's proposals out there to also turn some of these commercial spaces into residential units. And I think there's a little bit of movement around that, though there's some complexities. And again, there are layers of bureaucracy to be dealt with in order for them to come to fruition. So I would say locally, much like yourself, we meet a lot of bureaucracy as barriers. Minimum wage here in San Francisco is $18.67.
You're lucky. We're at $19.97 up here.
We are tied to CPI. We like to chase you down. People here in the city like to be the highest in the nation. So I think there'll probably be some proposals to outstrip you shortly. But we're 1867, and we do have currently in the state of San Francisco, we have a ballot measure to move the minimum wage to $18. That's coming up in November. And the CRA has taken a position against that. We know it's bad for inflation. The messaging is out there. Obviously, we had the Fast Food Act. I don't know that you have that up there where it's $20 a minute hour for the Fast Food Act. Are you familiar with the Fast Food Act, Bob?
Sadly, I am intimately familiar with it. I read the Chronicle every day so that the goofy trends that start in California, we get a head start on up here. So yeah, I know it well. And no, we do not have a similar thing up here in Washington State nor in Seattle.
So I have a few friends who operate fast food restaurants who fall into that category. You have to have, I think it's around 60 or so units domestically to have to pay that minimum wage. And it has, margins, their margins are tighter. They've had to raise menu prices a little bit, so they've seen a little bit of a revenue. It's kind of flat. The guest traffic is down, and margins are a little tighter. Though, as I see it, what'll happen here over time is that certainly in the fast food sector, we're going to create robots or devices, self-ordering kiosks and such to eliminate the level of personnel required to operate in the fast food sector. I think it's only a matter of time, when we look at some of the changes that are happening at our level, AI, reservationists, hosts, integrations with our reservation systems, all of those probably could be replaced with AI, artificial intelligence technology. And you can imagine the convenience that would be to the guests and also to the way the business operates and its availability. So there are changes afoot, but we're looking at minimum wage is the issue. The cost of operating in San Francisco, we have SF health mandates, so we have to offer our employees full health coverage to themselves at no cost. We feel that that's a good benefit to have, but it does. Well, that's why we have the mandate charge on our menus. I don't know. Do you have mandate menu charges in Seattle?
We do not. There's the ongoing argument about tipping versus service charge versus price increases, but there are no mandate menu charges up here.
Are you required to offer health insurance to your staff?
We are not required to. If you're a small employer in Seattle with fewer than 500 employees, you could get a tip offset for the last 10 years of about $3.50 an hour to, if you shared tips or if you paid for health insurance, you could offset about $3.50. That expires on January 1. Ivers has always considered itself in business to provide a good job for employees first, because if employees are happy, then we get happy guests. So the health insurance that we offer our employees is as good as the health insurance at any technology company or law firm in town. And the result is we have very, very low turnover. So we don't have to offer it, but we do because it's the right thing to do for employees.
Totally agree. We have a similar outcome here as well, where we do prioritize the importance of employee benefits and health insurance. We have our turnover year to date is about 15%, which
Really
is
low, especially in this
incredibly low.
environment, to be that low. That's impressive.
So we do have a very connected relationship with our staff. Ownership on property, makes a bigger difference. So we're able to hear and see the challenges that they face. The cost of living in the Bay Area is very, very high. And even though, our main, our frontline staff are pretty well compensated, the cost of living here is, eats a large chunk of that income. But yeah, we are an employer of choice. We like to believe that we do get way more applicants than we have openings, and our staff retention is very, very high, and it has to be that way. We have to be good employers, but we do offset the cost of health insurance with the mandate charge on our menus, which is currently 6%, which is high. We've seen other municipalities here in California also adopt that, and we just went through a big fight over the surcharges and gratuities that the state, at one point, the Attorney General here, wanted to argue were illegal. And thankfully, through some of our elected officials, Scott Wiener in particular, and Matt Haney, who argued on our behalf to carve out the restaurants from that menu pricing change, which really was supposed to be targeted to tickets, online ticketing vendors, and to airlines and to hotels. So thankfully, the CRA did a great job. Kudos to Jock Condy and his team for managing to carve us out from that legislation so that we can now operate as we always have, with transparency on our menus and pricing, so our guests know what they're committing to up front. But that was a victory for the CRA this year and the restaurant community. Legislatively, have you had any challenges in Seattle or in Washington?
Oh, they're perpetual. The one that we'll vote on in 2 weeks today is outlawing natural gas in Washington State.
Yeah. Well, the CRA had a great victory here. That was proposed at Berkeley. The city of Berkeley were doing that. And the CRA managed to get an injunction there and won a case. So that is effectively dead in the water. But I just saw today that Berkeley is proposing that there is a fine, a usage fine for therms measured by gas therms based on square footage of your commercial space, which, the theory behind it is that we're eliminating fossil fuel use. That's their driver. But little do they know, or I just don't think they're thinking it through, that the people they most impact are the small businesses, the restaurants that need gas, that the type of cuisine that they're making requires gas. And what's the replacement for that? How do they cook now? Can they cook with electric? Right? And the electric load, can we carry the electric load to service in the absence of gas? So it seems like they don't really connect the dots as to the impacts of trying to move away from, gas. And by levying these fees and fines for gas therm usage, that's a proposal that's currently in Berkeley at the moment, and it's on the ballot, I believe, in Berkeley in November. For us, the barometer here in California is looking at the small entities of very, very, liberal communities like Berkeley, and how they will then impact other communities and other municipalities and ultimately the state. But thus far, the CRA has done a very good job of fending that off. But
one of the rules that I've learned being involved in public process up here for the last 40 years is the less you know about an issue, the more of an expert on it you are. So it's really easy to say, and we would agree, we want to diminish generation of carbon. But until you look at the consequences of trying to eliminate natural gas, and calculating, as you've already identified, is there enough capacity in the electric grid to replace it? That analysis hasn't been done yet. So we encourage people to do the work that's necessary. It wouldn't surprise me if in 2 weeks the natural gas ban passes, but there'll be a whole bunch of people who legally dispute that. So I think there's going to be plenty of time to work through to a reasonable solution.
Yeah, I think, your friends here in the California Restaurant Association and the business community, restaurant business community here can help if needed in terms of how we won the case and how we have stopped that movement of the elimination of natural gas. Bob, I'm going to move on to final optimistic comment, hopefully that from you and I, about where we see our restaurants and industry going in the coming few years. If you were to take an optimistic bent on things, how would you look for the next couple of years?
So, Brian, what do you think has happened to the number of restaurants in Washington State since Corona?
What do I think has happened to them?
How many restaurants are there today compared to 2019?
I'd be only guessing, but I would assume it 20% less.
So in 2019, we had 14,957 restaurant licenses in Washington State. At the worst of Corona in 2020, we had 13,000, so it was down 2,000. As of June this year, we're approaching 17,000 restaurant licenses in Washington State, up 2,000. So even though we've been talking about the negative stuff, many chefs and operators are betting their family savings on opening new restaurants. And as we know, the innovation comes from the moms and pops in the small places. So that's my conclusion on optimism. There are a lot of people betting on hospitality in Washington State and putting their savings where their minds are.
Bob, are the concepts different?
So there's two categories of growth. One is the national fast food chains that are coming to town. They're selling based on low cost, $5 4 items at McDonald's or Subway. But the other category that's growing rapidly are moms and pops, where a chef or a sous chef in a nice restaurant decides he or she can do it better and decides to go out on his or her own and open their own places. So it's coming from both ends of the spectrum. The ones that interest me most are the moms and pops who are doing the interesting fusion of items and ingredients that most of us would never put together until we taste it the first time and say, wow, this is just fantastic. Well, how come I didn't think about that? Well, it's because I'm not a chef.
Yeah, San Francisco is obviously noted for its chef talent for many decades, numbers of Michelin star restaurants and so forth. But the models for those, it's proven that they're just very difficult to operate and make any level of profit. So for many years now, and even prior to COVID, San Francisco, the cutting edge was counter service models in terms of being able to create margin. And I still think that's the general direction that the restaurants are going in San Francisco, is controlled labor models, counter service, but ethnically diverse. So you get a lot of these, unique culinary ethnic restaurants that are attractive. Their cuisine are unique and special, but they're operating with a counter service type model, which can manage the labor component. And that still seems to be the direction of San Francisco. The full service restaurants have taken a hit. They've reduced in their numbers. The higher end, the fine dining level, they've really been the ones that have hurt the most, mostly because of cost. Inflation really hurt. But I'm optimistic about the direction San Francisco is going in, especially after coming out of Fleet Week, when we had the biggest numbers, record attendance in the city, viewing the Blue Angels, and the city, of course, shining with beautiful weather. And it is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I had been to New York City with my wife recently, and upon my return, having stayed in Manhattan, and yes, I enjoy New York City, but as I was driving back from SFO to my home in Walnut Creek across the Bay Bridge, I noticed what a spectacular city San Francisco is, just unique in its geography, in its topography, its visual, the bay, the ocean, the bridges, the climate, and we just can only do better. And I'm very confident that we will. Hospitality is in my blood. Sounds it's in your blood too, Bob. We're about taking care of people. We enjoy taking care of people. Our restaurants probably reflect that. Our staff reflect that. And I think ultimately people want to gather. They want to be together. They want to celebrate. They want to celebrate significant moments in their lives with their family, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations. Our business community also want to gather. They want to meet with their staff. That's one area of our segment of our business that has grown, is the private dining sector.
We've seen the same thing, that there's been a huge increase in lunch meetings by staff for people who are coming to work, and special occasion dining. Our banquets business has quintupled because you're right, people want to get back together.
Yeah, I think that at our core as humans, we want to be in person. We want to see each other. We want to celebrate. We want to live life. Bob, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Brian, when next I'm in San Francisco and I'm down about quarterly, I'll give you a call and we can meet in person.
Yeah, would love to. And I won't have to ship the meat, the steaks, the wonderful dry-aged steaks that we serve here at Epic. I won't have to ship them to you. I can serve them to you in our beautiful dining room, looking out at the Bay Bridge on a glorious evening. And
you know, the issue, Brian, when I come down for Federal Reserve meetings is I run by your restaurants at 4 or 5 in the morning and they're not open. Come on, you got to open when the people want to eat.
Yes, we have to do breakfast. Yes, it sounds like a great idea, Bob. We had a great chat. It was very fluid. I really enjoyed listening to you, Bob, and learning from your experiences up in Seattle. Thank you so much for participating, and I really do look forward to meeting you in person.
Indeed. Thanks, Brian.
Hello, I'm Anthony Zoller with the Zoller Law Group.
Operating a restaurant is tough. What's keeping you up at night? If you have questions you would like us to answer, please submit them on our website at calrest.org/ask. That's calrest.org/ask. Your question might be answered here on a future episode of Confidential Bulletin.
I wanted to discuss a few of the best practices around meal and rest breaks under California law. So first, California employers need to understand the timing requirements for the 30-minute meal break as well as the 10-minute rest break. The California Restaurant Association has a ton of articles on that, and employers need to review that to make sure that they're providing the 30-minute meal break and the 10-minute rest breaks on time, and they're giving the numbered of breaks required for the lengths of shifts. Also, employers need to look at their policies, their handbook and other posters or other distributed policies to the employees to make sure that those accurately reflect the policy of the company and that policy is compliant with California law. So this needs to be reviewed at least once a year. Third, the employers need to ensure that the frontline managers also know how to administer and when to provide the 10-minute rest break and the 30-minute meal breaks. If you have a compliant policy and the executives understand it, but your frontline managers don't understand when to provide these breaks, those policies are worthless. So the frontline managers need to understand these requirements inside and out. And finally, employers need to understand when, what recording obligations they have when it comes to the 30-minute meal break and the 10-minute rest break. For the 30-minute meal break, it does need to be required under California law, and it's best practice for employers to record when the employee starts the 30-minute meal break and when they end the 30-minute meal break. As for the 10-minute rest break, California law actually doesn't require that to be recorded. So it is a best practice that most employers utilize, is not recording the 10-minute rest break, but instead just making the 10-minute rest break available to employees for them to take according to the policy.